The old mop bucket squeaked as Vincent rolled it down the marble hallway of Westfield Academy. Every evening at 6 o'clock sharp, after the last expensive car had driven away and the last wealthy student had disappeared behind tinted windows, Vincent would begin his routine. He had been doing this job for 3 long years, and he knew every corner of this fancy private school like the back of his weathered hands. Vincent was 45 years old. Though the lines around his eyes made him look older, his uniform was always clean and pressed even if it had seen better days. He took pride in his work, even when others barely noticed he existed. To most people at Westfield Academy, Vincent was just part of the background, invisible, like the expensive paintings on the walls or the polished trophy cases that lined the corridors. But Vincent had not always been invisible. Once, many years ago, he had been someone different entirely. As he pushed his cart past the administrative offices, Vincent could hear the familiar sound drifting from the music wing. Piano music. It was always piano music at this time of evening, and it always came from the same room, the main practice hall where the most expensive instrument in the school lived. The music stopped Vincent in his tracks, as it did every single evening. He closed his eyes and listened. The melody was beautiful, but something about it felt incomplete. The student was clearly talented, but there were small mistakes, tiny hesitations that spoke of uncertainty. Vincent could hear where the rhythm faltered slightly, where the emotion should have been deeper. He shook his head and continued pushing his cart. It was not his place to judge. After all, he was just the janitor. The music was coming from Sophia Wellington, though Vincent only knew her name because he had seen it on the expensive leather music case she carried. Sophia was 16, with long auburn hair that always looked perfect and clothes that probably cost more than Vincent made in a month. Her family's name was etched in gold letters on a plaque near the school's main entrance, right next to the other wealthy donors who kept places like Westfield Academy running. Sophia had been staying late every evening for the past 2 months, practicing on the magnificent Steinway grand piano that sat in the center of the main music room. The instrument was worth more than $50,000, donated by her own family 3 years ago. It was her piano in every sense that mattered. But tonight, as Vincent mopped the hallway outside the music wing, he noticed something different in the music. There was frustration in the notes, a tension that had not been there before. The same passage was being played over and over again, and each time it ended abruptly with what sounded like hands slamming down on the keys. Vincent paused his work and glanced toward the music room. Through the small window in the door, he could see Sophia's silhouette bent over the piano bench. Her shoulders were tense, and even from a distance, Vincent could see the frustration in her posture. The music started again, the same challenging passage from what Vincent recognized as Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. It was a piece he knew well, though he had not played it in over 20 years. His grandmother had taught him that very piece when he was just a boy, sitting beside him on the old upright piano in their small apartment. Those had been different times. Vincent's grandmother, Rose, had been a classically trained pianist who had once dreamed of performing in great concert halls. Life had taken her dreams in a different direction, but she had never lost her love for music. She had passed that love on to Vincent, spending countless hours teaching him everything she knew. Music is not just about playing the right notes, she would tell him, her gentle hands guiding his small fingers across the keys. Music is about telling a story. It is about making people feel something they have never felt before. Vincent had been good, really good. By the time he was 15, he could play pieces that took most students years to master. His grandmother had saved every penny to pay for proper lessons with a real teacher. There had been talk of music school, of scholarships, of a future filled with concert halls and applause. But life had other plans. The fire had taken everything in one terrible night when Vincent was 17. Their apartment, their belongings, and most devastating of all, his grandmother. She had gone back inside to save her sheet music, pages and pages of compositions she had written over the years. Vincent had screamed for her not to go, but she had looked at him with tears in her eyes and said, "These are our memories, Vincent. These are our songs." The firefighters found her collapsed near the old upright piano, clutching a bundle of singed papers to her chest. After that, Vincent could not bring himself to touch a piano. The music that had once brought him joy now brought only pain. He dropped out of school, worked whatever jobs he could find, and slowly, the calluses on his fingertips from years of playing faded away. Now, 30 years later, he spent his evenings mopping floors and emptying trash cans in a world where music lived behind closed doors, played by students who had everything he had once dreamed of, but could never fully appreciate what they possessed. The music from the practice room stopped again, followed by another frustrated outburst. Vincent found himself moving closer to the door, drawn by an instinct he thought he had buried long ago. Through the window, he watched Sophia struggle with the same passage his grandmother had helped him master all those years ago. If only she could hear what the music was supposed to sound like, Vincent thought. If only someone could show her how Chopin had intended those notes to flow together, how the melody was meant to dance with the harmony, how the silence between the notes was just as important as the notes themselves. But Vincent was just the janitor. His job was to clean, not to teach. His job was to remain invisible, to let the wealthy students pursue their expensive educations while he made sure their world stayed spotless and perfect. He turned away from the window and continued down the hallway with his mop bucket. Behind him, Sophia started the passage again. And once more, Vincent heard the same mistakes, the same frustrations, the same beautiful music that was so close to being perfect but somehow never quite reached its full potential. Vincent did not know that in just a few days, everything would change. He did not know that a forgotten folder of sheet music would create a moment that would transform both their lives forever. All he knew was that somewhere deep inside his chest, in a place he had kept locked away for 28 years, the music was still there waiting. 3 days later, the rain was coming down hard against the tall windows of Westfield Academy. Vincent could hear it drumming on the roof as he made his way through the empty hallways with his cleaning cart. The sound reminded him of the night everything changed in his life, and he tried to push those memories away as he always did. It was Thursday evening, and the school felt especially quiet. Most of the students had rushed out early because of the storm, eager to get to their warm cars and expensive homes. Even the teachers seemed to have left faster than usual, leaving behind only the familiar silence that Vincent knew so well. As he approached the music wing, Vincent expected to hear the usual piano practice coming from the main room. Sophia had been there every evening for weeks now, still struggling with that same Chopin piece, but tonight something was different. The hallway was completely silent. Vincent paused outside the music room and peered through the small window in the door. The room was empty, the magnificent piano sitting alone under the soft glow of the practice lights. For a moment he felt relieved. Maybe tonight he could clean in peace without hearing those beautiful, frustrating, almost right notes that reminded him so much of his past. He unlocked the door and pushed his cart inside. The room smelled like expensive wood polish and the faint scent of rosin from the violin cases stored along the walls. Vincent had always been careful in this room, treating it like a sacred space. He knew how much these instruments cost, how important they were to the families who had donated them. As he began dusting the chairs and music stands, Vincent's eyes kept drifting to the piano. The Steinway sat there like a sleeping giant, its black surface reflecting the overhead lights. He had cleaned around it hundreds of times, but he had never actually touched it. That was an unspoken rule he had created for himself. Look but don't touch, clean but don't disturb. Tonight felt different, though. Maybe it was the rain, or the unusual quiet, or the fact that he had been thinking more than usual about his grandmother lately. Whatever it was, Vincent found himself moving closer to the piano. He reached out with his dust cloth to clean the bench, and that's when he saw it. Sophia had left her folder of sheet music behind, open to the page she had been practicing. The Chopin nocturne stared back at him, the familiar notes bringing a rush of memories he had tried so hard to keep buried. Vincent set down his cloth and looked at the music more closely. He could see pencil marks where Sophia had written in fingering suggestions, and eraser smudges where she had changed the markings over and over again. She was working so hard, trying so desperately to get it right, but Vincent could see that she was approaching the piece all wrong. The fingering she had marked would never give her the smooth, flowing sound that Chopin had intended. She was thinking about it like a technical exercise instead of a story. His grandmother's voice echoed in his memory. Music is not just about playing the right notes. Music is about telling a story. Almost without thinking, Vincent sat down on the bench. The seat was the perfect height, adjusted for Sophia's practice sessions. He looked down at the keys, 88 black and white rectangles that had once been his whole world. His hands hovered over them, trembling slightly. What was he doing? He was the janitor. This was not his place. These were not his keys to touch. But the music was calling to him. After 28 years of silence, after decades of pushing down the melodies that lived in his heart, Vincent could not resist any longer. His right hand found middle C, pressing it so softly that the sound was barely audible. Then his left hand joined, finding the opening chord of the nocturne. The first notes filled the room like water filling an empty glass. Vincent's muscle memory kicked in immediately, his fingers remembering exactly where they belonged. The years fell away, and suddenly he was not a middle-aged janitor in a school uniform. He was 17 again, sitting beside his grandmother, feeling the music flow through him like electricity. But this was not the hesitant, technical playing he had been hearing from Sophia for weeks. This was the piece as it was meant to be played. Vincent's hands moved across the keys with a confidence born from years of practice, from a deep understanding of what Chopin had been trying to say when he wrote those notes over 150 years ago. The melody sang out, sweet and melancholy, while his left hand provided the gentle, rolling accompaniment that made the whole piece come alive. Vincent closed his eyes and let himself disappear into the music. For the first time in nearly 3 decades, he felt complete. He played through the entire first section, then moved into the more challenging middle part where Sophia always struggled. His fingers danced through the complex passages effortlessly, bringing out the subtle emotions that made this piece so beloved. This was not just playing notes. This was speaking a language that transcended words, telling a story of longing and beauty and hope. Vincent was so lost in the music that he did not hear the footsteps in the hallway. He did not hear the door open quietly behind him. He did not notice the figure standing in the doorway, completely frozen with shock. Sophia had come back for her forgotten sheet music, running through the rain from her driver's car. She had expected to grab her folder quickly and leave, but as she approached the music room, she heard something that made her stop breathing. Someone was playing her piano, but this was not just anyone playing. This was the most beautiful, most perfect rendition of the nocturne she had ever heard. Every note was exactly where it should be. Every phrase shaped with an understanding that went far beyond technical skill. This was playing with soul. She stood in the doorway, water still dripping from her expensive coat, watching in complete amazement as the school janitor, the invisible man she had never really noticed before, played her piece better than she had ever dreamed of playing it herself. Vincent reached the climax of the piece, the moment where the melody soars above everything else in a burst of pure emotion. His entire body swayed with the music, his face peaceful and transformed. This was not the tired, worn-down man who mopped her floors every evening. This was an artist. As the last notes faded into silence, Vincent sat still for a moment, his hands resting on the keys. The spell was broken slowly, like waking up from a beautiful dream. Reality came creeping back. Where he was, what he had done, how much trouble he was probably in. That's when he heard the soft sound of someone breathing behind him. Vincent's blood turned to ice. He spun around on the bench, expecting to see the principal or a security guard, ready to fire him on the spot. Instead, he saw a 16-year-old girl with wide eyes and an expression of pure wonder on her face. "How long have you been standing there?" Vincent whispered, his voice barely audible. The silence in the room felt like it lasted forever. Vincent's heart was pounding so hard he was sure Sophia could hear it. His hands were still resting on the piano keys, but now they felt like they were burning. He had been caught red-handed doing the one thing he knew he should never do. "I'm sorry," Vincent said quickly, jumping up from the bench so fast he almost knocked it over. "I'm so sorry. I was just cleaning and I saw the music and I shouldn't have touched anything. Please don't tell anyone. I really need this job." The words tumbled out of his mouth in a rush. He grabbed his dust cloth from where he had left it on the piano and started wiping down surfaces that were already clean, keeping his eyes down, unable to look at Sophia directly. In his mind, he was already packing up his few belongings from the janitor's closet, already imagining the phone call he would have to make to his landlord about being late with rent again. But Sophia did not move from the doorway. She did not shout at him or demand to know what he thought he was doing. Instead, she stepped further into the room, closing the door quietly behind her. "Wait," she said softly. "Just wait a minute." Vincent stopped his frantic cleaning but kept his back to her, his shoulders tense with fear and embarrassment. He had spent 3 years being invisible in this school, and now in one stupid moment, he had thrown it all away. "That was incredible," Sophia said, and there was something in her voice that made Vincent finally turn around to look at her. "I mean, really incredible. I've been trying to play that piece for 2 months, and you just... How did you do that?" Vincent stared at her, confused. This was not the reaction he had expected. Where was the anger? Where was the outrage that the janitor had dared to touch her expensive piano? "You're not mad?" he asked cautiously. "Mad?" Sophia shook her head, her eyes still wide with amazement. "Are you kidding me? That was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. I've had private lessons since I was 6 years old, and I've never heard anyone play like that." "How long have you been playing?" Vincent looked down at his hands, still holding the dustcloth. "I don't play anymore," he said quietly. "But you just did, and you were amazing." Sophia moved closer, no longer the privileged teenager who barely noticed the help. She looked genuinely curious, genuinely interested. "Where did you learn to play like that?" For a moment, Vincent considered lying. He could make up some story about taking a few lessons as a kid, downplay his abilities, make this whole thing seem like a fluke. But something about the way Sophia was looking at him, with genuine respect and curiosity, made him want to tell the truth. "My grandmother," he said finally. "She taught me when I was young. She must have been an amazing teacher. I mean, you play better than most of my classmates who've been taking lessons their whole lives. Better than me, and I've been playing for 10 years. Sophia sat down in one of the chairs near the piano, making it clear she was not going anywhere. "Tell me about her." Vincent hesitated. He had not talked about his grandmother to anyone in years. Most people in his life now did not even know he had ever played piano. It was too painful, too much a reminder of everything he had lost. But there was something about this moment, about the way the rain was still pattering against the windows and the way the practice room felt like its own little world, that made him want to share. "Her name was Rose," Vincent said, still standing awkwardly near the piano. "She was classically trained. She grew up wanting to be a concert pianist, but life got in the way, you know. She got married young, had kids, had to work regular jobs to pay the bills, but she never stopped loving music, so she taught you?" Sophia prompted gently when Vincent paused. Vincent nodded. "Every day after school. We had this old upright piano in our apartment. It was probably 50 years old and half the keys stuck, but she made it sound like a Steinway." He glanced at the magnificent instrument behind him. "She used to say that it did not matter what piano you played on. What mattered was the music you carried in your heart." "She sounds wonderful," Sophia said, and Vincent could hear the sincerity in her voice. "She was." Vincent's voice got quieter. "She saved every penny she could to pay for real lessons for me. There was talk about music school, maybe even a scholarship. I was good, really good. At least I thought I was back then." "You still are," Sophia said firmly. "What happened? Why did you stop?" This was the part Vincent never talked about. This was the part that still woke him up in the middle of the night sometimes, 28 years later. But somehow, in this quiet room with this girl who had listened to his music without judgment, the words came out. "There was a fire," he said simply. "I was 17. We lost everything. Our apartment, all our belongings, all her sheet music that she had collected over the years. She had written some of her own compositions too, and they were all gone." Sophia's face went soft with sympathy. "That's terrible. But you both made it out okay, right?" Vincent shook his head slowly. "She went back inside. The firefighters told everyone to stay out, but she went back for her music. She said those papers were our memories, our songs. She could not let them burn." The room went completely silent except for the sound of rain against the windows. Sophia's hand went to her mouth. "They found her next to the old piano," Vincent continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "She was holding what was left of her compositions. The doctor said the smoke got to her before the fire did, so she did not suffer. But she was gone, and with her went everything that mattered to me." "Vincent," Sophia said softly, and hearing his name in her voice made him look up at her. "I'm so sorry. I can't even imagine. After that, I could not touch a piano," Vincent said. Every time I tried, all I could think about was her, and how I should have stopped her from going back inside. Music just reminded me of everything I had lost, so I stopped playing. I got whatever jobs I could find, and I tried to forget that music had ever been part of my life. But you never really forgot, Sophia observed. I could hear it in the way you played tonight. That kind of feeling, that kind of understanding, it does not just disappear. Vincent looked at the piano again. I guess not. But it does not matter now. I'm 45 years old. I clean floors for a living. That other life, the one where I could have been a musician, that's long gone. Is it? Sophia asked, and there was something in her voice that made Vincent look at her more carefully. Maybe it does not have to be. Vincent shook his head. Sophia, I appreciate what you're saying, but this is the real world. People like me don't get second chances at dreams like that. I'm just grateful to have a job, even if it's cleaning up after people who have everything I once wanted. But what if things could be different? Sophia asked, standing up from her chair. What if there was a way? Vincent could see something working behind her eyes, some idea forming. It made him nervous. Please, he said. Just promise me you won't tell anyone about tonight. I really do need this job, and if the administration finds out I was playing the piano, they'll what? Sophia asked. Fire you for being incredibly talented? They'll fire me for touching expensive school property that does not belong to me. Sophia looked at the piano, then back at Vincent. What if I told you that this piano belongs to my family? We donated it 3 years ago. Technically, I have more right to say who can play it than anyone else in this school. Vincent stared at her. He had known the piano was donated by a wealthy family, but he had never connected it to Sophia specifically. That does not change anything, he said. I'm still just the janitor. No, Sophia said firmly, and there was a determination in her voice that reminded Vincent suddenly that she came from a family used to getting what they wanted. You're not just anything. You're a pianist, and I think it's time everyone else knew it too. The next morning, Vincent arrived at work expecting everything to go back to normal. He had barely slept, replaying the conversation with Sophia over and over in his mind. Part of him hoped she would forget all about their encounter. Part of him hoped she would not. But as he pushed his cleaning cart through the main hallway, Vincent could not shake the feeling that something had changed. Students looked at him a little longer than usual. Teachers seemed to glance in his direction more often. Maybe it was just his imagination, or maybe word had somehow gotten out about what happened in the music room. Vincent was emptying trash cans near the administrative offices when he heard raised voices coming from the principal's office. One of those voices belonged to Sophia. I don't think you understand what I'm asking, Sophia was saying, and even through the closed door, Vincent could hear the determination in her voice. This is not a request. This is something that needs to happen. Miss Wellington, with all due respect to your family and everything they have done for this school, came the measured voice of Principal Davidson. What you're suggesting is simply not appropriate. We cannot have our maintenance staff using school facilities for personal activities. Vincent's stomach dropped. She had told them. Despite his pleading with her to keep their encounter secret, Sophia had gone straight to the administration. He was definitely going to lose his job now. Personal activities? Sophia's voice rose with indignation. You call music personal activities? This is a school that claims to value arts education above everything else. We have plaques all over these walls talking about nurturing talent wherever we find it. That's different, came another voice that Vincent recognized as Ms. Chen, the music director. Those plaques refer to our students, not our employees. There are liability issues, insurance concerns, proper protocols to follow. Protocols, Sophia repeated, and Vincent could practically hear her rolling her eyes. Let me ask you something, Miss Chen. In all your years of teaching, have you ever heard anyone play Chopin better than what you heard on my phone recording last night? Vincent's heart stopped. She had recorded him when? He tried to remember every detail of their conversation, but he could not recall seeing her take out her phone. That's not the point, Ms. Chen said, but there was something less certain in her voice now. That's exactly the point, Sophia shot back. You've been trying to teach me that piece for months. Vincent played it perfectly in one try. Don't you think our other students could benefit from learning from someone with that level of skill? Sophia, Principal Davidson said, using her first name in a way that suggested he was trying to be patient. I understand you're impressed by what you heard, but we have professional standards to maintain. Our music instructors have degrees, certifications, years of training. We can't just let anyone teach our students no matter how talented they might be. Anyone? Sophia's voice was dangerously quiet now. You mean you can't let someone like Vincent teach? Someone who works with his hands instead of sitting behind a desk? The office went silent, and Vincent knew Principal Davidson was probably scrambling to figure out how to respond to that accusation without making things worse. That's not what I meant, the principal said carefully. Isn't it? Because it sounds to me like you think Vincent is not good enough to share his talent with your precious students just because he cleans your floors instead of paying $50,000 a year in tuition. Vincent had to admire Sophia's directness, even as he worried about what this confrontation would mean for his job. She was not backing down, and she was using the same fearlessness that probably served her family well in business negotiations. What exactly are you proposing? Ms. Chen asked, and Vincent could hear the reluctance in her voice. I want Vincent to perform at the spring recital, Sophia said, and even Vincent had to grip the wall to steady himself at that announcement. Not as part of some charity case or feel-good story. As a featured performer, someone our students can learn from. Absolutely not, Principal Davidson said immediately. The spring recital is for our students and their families. We have donors attending, board members, people who expect a certain level of presentation. Presentation? Sophia's voice was ice cold now. You mean you're worried about what people will think when they see the janitor sitting at the same piano as the trust fund kids? Sophia, that's enough, Ms. Chen warned. No, it's not enough. Not even close. Vincent could hear Sophia moving around the office, probably pacing the way she did when she was frustrated with her piano practice. Let me make this very simple for everyone. My family donated that piano specifically so talented musicians could share their gifts with our school community. Vincent is the most talented musician I've ever heard in person. Therefore, Vincent should be playing that piano. Your family donated the piano for the education of our students, Principal Davidson corrected, not for employee recitals. Then let's call it education, Sophia said smoothly. A master class. Vincent can play a piece, maybe teach the students something about interpretation, about putting emotion into music instead of just hitting the right notes. Vincent had to hand it to her. She was smart. She was reframing the whole situation in educational terms, making it harder for them to dismiss outright. Even if we were to consider such a thing, Ms. Chen said slowly, it would need approval from the board, from the parents, from multiple committees. The spring recital is in 3 weeks. There's no time to organize something like this properly. There's plenty of time if people stop making excuses, Sophia replied. But fine. If you won't let Vincent perform at the recital, then I won't perform either. The silence that followed was deafening. Vincent knew how big a deal this was. Sophia was one of their star students, and her family was one of the school's biggest donors. Her refusing to perform would be a major problem. You can't be serious, Principal Davidson said finally. Dead serious. If this school doesn't think Vincent is good enough to share a stage with me, then obviously my own playing must not be good enough either. I'll withdraw from the recital and spend the evening at home instead. Sophia, don't be ridiculous, Ms. Chen said. You've been preparing for months. Your parents are expecting to see you perform. Then I guess you better figure out a way to make Vincent part of the program. Vincent could not believe what he was hearing. This 16-year-old girl was going head-to-head with the school administration and winning. She was using her privilege, something that had always felt so unfair to Vincent, to fight for him. We need to discuss this privately, Principal Davidson said, and Vincent could hear the frustration in his voice. Fine. But just so we're clear, I'm not the only one who feels this way. I've talked to several other students, and they're all interested in hearing Vincent play. Some of them are saying they might reconsider their own participation if he's not included. Vincent doubted this was true, but he had to admire Sophia's strategy. She was making it sound like a student movement rather than just one girl's crusade. You have until tomorrow morning to decide, Sophia continued. If I don't hear that Vincent is being included in the recital program, I'll be making some phone calls to my parents, and they'll be making some phone calls to the Board of Trustees. The threat hung in the air like a storm cloud. Everyone in that room knew exactly what those phone calls would mean. The Wellington family had donated more than just a piano to Westfield Academy over the years. We'll discuss it, Principal Davidson said finally, his voice tight with barely controlled frustration. Good. And just so you know, Vincent doesn't know anything about this conversation. I'm doing this because it's the right thing to do. Not because he asked me to. So if you're thinking about taking this out on him somehow, that would be a very bad idea. Vincent heard footsteps approaching the door and quickly moved away from the area, pushing his cart down the hallway as fast as he could without making noise. His mind was spinning with everything he had just heard. Sophia was fighting for him. Really fighting. Using every advantage she had to try to give him something he had never dared to dream of again. The chance to play music in front of people who might actually appreciate it, but he was also terrified. What if the school said no and fired him out of spite? What if they said yes and he embarrassed himself in front of all those wealthy, important people? What if his hands shook or his memory failed him after all these years? As Vincent rounded the corner toward the music wing, he saw Sophia walking toward him from the opposite direction. She looked determined but also nervous, and when she saw him, she gave him a small, uncertain smile. "We need to talk," she said simply. Vincent nodded, knowing that his quiet, invisible life at Westfield Academy was about to change forever, one way or another. 2 weeks later, Vincent stood in the small storage room behind the auditorium stage, trying to calm his nerves. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely tie the bow tie that Sophia had bought for him. The formal clothes felt strange on his body. He had not worn anything fancier than his work uniform in years. Through the thin walls, he could hear the murmur of hundreds of voices as parents and donors filled the auditorium seats. The annual spring recital was the biggest event of the year at Westfield Academy, and tonight, Vincent was going to be part of it. The school had finally agreed to Sophia's demands, though Vincent suspected it had more to do with some behind-the-scenes phone calls from her parents than with any sudden change of heart from the administration. Principal Davidson had made it clear that this was a one-time arrangement and Vincent better not embarrass the school. "You ready?" Sophia asked, poking her head through the storage room door. She was wearing an elegant black dress that probably cost more than Vincent made in 3 months, but her face showed the same nervous energy he was feeling. "I don't know if I can do this," Vincent admitted, flexing his fingers to try to stop the trembling. "What if I mess up? What if I forget the music? It's been so long since I played in front of people." "You're not going to mess up," Sophia said firmly, stepping into the room and closing the door behind her. "I've heard you play every night for the past 2 weeks. You're incredible, Vincent. You just have to trust yourself." After the confrontation with the administration, Sophia had convinced Vincent to stay after hours to practice together. They had worked out a plan. She would introduce him and explain his story to the audience. Then they would perform a duet arrangement of the Chopin Nocturne that Vincent had created. It would showcase both of their skills while telling the story of how music had brought them together. "The audience out there," Vincent said, running his hand through his hair, "they're not expecting someone like me. They're expecting polished students from wealthy families, not a janitor who learned to play on a broken piano in a tiny apartment." "Maybe that's exactly what they need to see," Sophia replied. "Maybe they need to learn that talent doesn't care about money or social status. Maybe they need to understand that the person who cleans their floors might have more to offer than they ever imagined." Vincent looked at her with a mixture of gratitude and amazement. In just 2 weeks, this teenage girl had turned his world upside down. She had fought battles for him that he never would have fought for himself. She had believed in him when he had forgotten how to believe in himself. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. "Really? You could have just kept quiet about that night. You could have let things go back to normal." Sophia was quiet for a moment, thinking about her answer. "Because normal wasn't good enough," she said finally. "I was sitting in that music room every night, trying so hard to play one piece perfectly and getting frustrated because I couldn't make it sound the way I wanted. Then I heard you play it and I realized I had been thinking about music all wrong." "What do you mean?" "I was treating it like a math problem. Like if I just practiced enough and got all the technical parts right, it would be beautiful. But you showed me that music isn't about being perfect. It's about sharing something real with people. It's about making them feel something." Through the walls, they could hear Ms. Chen's voice over the sound system, welcoming everyone to the recital and introducing the first student performer. "We're up in 20 minutes, Sophia said, checking her watch. "Are you sure you're ready?" Vincent took a deep breath and looked down at his hands. They were still shaking slightly, but there was something else there now, too. For the first time in 28 years, he felt excited about playing music again. Not just in an empty room by himself, but for people who might actually appreciate what he had to offer. "I'm ready," he said, and he almost believed it. The next 20 minutes passed in a blur of student performances. Vincent listened from backstage as young pianists, violinists, and singers took their turns on stage. They were all talented, all well-trained, but he could hear what Sophia meant about the difference between technical skill and real emotion. Some of the performances were beautiful. Others felt mechanical, like exercises rather than music. Finally, Ms. Chen's voice came over the sound system again. "Ladies and gentlemen, for our next performance, I'd like to invite Sophia Wellington to the stage." Vincent watched from the wings as Sophia walked out to the center of the stage. She looked poised and confident, but he could see the slight tremor in her hands as she approached the microphone. "Good evening," she said, her voice clear and strong. "Before I perform tonight, I want to tell you a story about music, and about how sometimes the most extraordinary talent can be found in the most unexpected places." Vincent felt his heart hammering in his chest as Sophia began to tell the audience about their encounter in the music room, about his background, about the tragic loss of his grandmother and his 28 years away from music. "Music doesn't care about your bank account or your family name," Sophia continued. "Music only cares about the passion and skill you bring to it. Tonight I want to share the stage with someone who has reminded me what music is really about. Please welcome Vincent Thompson." Vincent walked out onto the stage, his legs feeling like they might give out at any moment. The auditorium was packed with several hundred people, all of them staring at him with expressions ranging from curiosity to confusion to outright skepticism. He recognized some faces from his 3 years of cleaning their children's classrooms. Parents who had never really looked at him before tonight. He sat down at the piano bench next to Sophia, and suddenly all the fear melted away. This was the same Steinway he had been playing for 2 weeks. The same keys, the same feel, the same potential for beauty. It did not matter who was watching. What mattered was the music. Sophia began with the opening melody of the nocturne, her playing more confident and expressive than Vincent had ever heard it. Then Vincent joined in with the harmony line he had created, weaving around her melody with a complexity that made the familiar piece sound entirely new. The audience went completely silent. Vincent could feel their attention shift from skeptical curiosity to genuine amazement as the music filled the auditorium. This was not just two people playing piano together. This was a conversation between two musicians who understood each other perfectly, creating something greater than either could achieve alone. As they reached the climactic moment of the piece, Vincent felt his grandmother's presence in the room with him. He could almost hear her voice saying, "Music is about making people feel something they have never felt before." And looking out at the faces in the audience, faces that had gone from doubt to wonder to complete absorption, Vincent knew they were feeling it. When the last note faded into silence, the auditorium stayed quiet for what felt like an eternity. Then slowly one person began to clap, then another. Then suddenly the entire audience was on their feet, applauding with an enthusiasm Vincent had never heard at a school recital. The ovation went on for several minutes, and Vincent saw tears in the eyes of people who had never really seen him before tonight. Principal Davidson was clapping reluctantly but steadily. Ms. Chen was shaking her head in amazement. Even some of the students looked genuinely moved by what they had just heard. But the moment that meant the most to Vincent was when he looked over at Sophia and saw the pure joy on her face. She had not just given him a chance to perform, she had given him back a part of himself he thought was lost forever. After the recital ended and the crowds began to disperse, Vincent found himself surrounded by people who wanted to talk to him. Parents asking about music lessons for their children, students wanting to know more about his background, even a representative from the local community college who mentioned their music program. But the conversation that surprised him most came from Mr. Wellington, Sophia's father, who approached Vincent as he was packing up his sheet music. "That was remarkable," Mr. Wellington said, extending his hand. "Truly remarkable. I wanted to ask if you'd be interested in teaching piano lessons. We have a community center that serves underprivileged kids, and we've been looking for someone who could really connect with them, someone who understands that talent can come from anywhere." Vincent looked across the stage where Sophia was talking animatedly with Ms. Chen about music theory. 6 months ago, he had been invisible. Tonight, people were seeing him, really seeing him, for the first time in decades. "I'd like that very much," Vincent said, shaking Mr. Wellington's hand. As Vincent walked home through the quiet streets that night, he thought about his grandmother Rose, and how proud she would have been to see him playing again. The sheet music tucked under his arm felt like a promise, not just of the lessons he would teach, but of all the music still waiting to be shared. Sometimes, Vincent realized the most beautiful melodies come from the most broken places. And sometimes all it takes is one person believing in you to remember that the music was always there, just waiting for the right moment to be heard again.